Hello, James. It's so nice to have you on the show today. How are you doing?
Great, Elisha or Elijah. I'm so bad at pronouncing names, but very
Oh,
good
no.
to sit down with you. This is a
Yeah,
treat.
awesome, awesome, my man. And no worries at all, no worries. And you see, oftentimes, James, I love to thank my guest for two things. And I do this so often to the point where it has become my anthem. So, firstly, my man, I want to say thank you so very much for investing in yourself. You see, James, you are on this platform right now because you did invest that in yourself. And oftentimes, my man, I love to make reference to the amazing mango tree. You see, some couple of months back, James, I was on a particular road, and just by the roadside, my man, there was this very tall, unattractive mango tree. And I used the word unattractive because the mango tree's got no mangoes on it, and the leaves were all dry. So I just walked past it and I went my way. But you see, my man, just recently I was on that same road, and this time around, a lot's changed about the mango tree. You see, the mango tree caught my attention pretty good from a distance, and immediately I got the urge to move so close to it, of which I did, and it wowed me because now the mango tree's got a lot of mangoes on it, beautiful green leaves and healthy branches. And not just mangoes now, James. I'm talking about ripe mangoes. It was such a lovely experience that day, and I was so excited. Here is my point. The fact that you dedicated your time, energy, and resources to becoming the amazing James that you are today, that alone has made it impossible for me to skip you. And that's why you got the request from me to be on the show because I was attracted to the fruit of all that you're doing, your philosophies, your insights, the impact your work is having, and how you are offering your solutions, James. This stuff's so beautiful. And just before I sent you that request, my man, I said to myself, I've got to benefit from these beautiful things James is doing. And not only me now, because I don't want to look selfish, and even with the audience. And here we are today with the amazing James. So thank you so very much for doing that to yourself. And secondly, thank you for saying yes to the invite. Because if you had said nope, there was nothing Elisha could do about it. Thanks so much, my man.
Well, thank you for the kind words. A couple thoughts on that. One, the mango tree, it sounds like it grew without requiring micromanagement. So you didn't have to do very much. You gave it time, you gave it space, and you came back and it had grown into something beautiful. So I think there's a lot of parallels to the way that we build teams in organizations. And I appreciate all the kind words. I'm sure that the reason you like me so much is you don't know me that well. But there are plenty of people who would disagree with you. But also a lot of people who would agree with you. So, life's interesting that way. You
Yeah, I tell you.
hit it off with certain people and you find your tribe.
Exactly. And no matter how perfect you are, they would always find something negative to talk about you. You see, to say about you. I got that. So, my man, let's get started. You see, I am quite excited to have you on the show today for some reasons. Firstly, my interest in knowledge seeking. You see, James, I believe in order for one to transition from a terrible situation, a chaotic situation, to that of a beautiful one, my man, I believe it takes the application of knowledge, quality information, and not just knowledge alone, but the application of it. And you see, James, ever since I discovered that light in the Hebrew means knowledge and darkness ignorance, I've been so keen to knowledge seeking. Why? Because I do not want to remain in the dark. So that's going to make our conversation today very important to me and even to the listeners. And the second reason why I'm excited to have the incredible James on the show is for the sake of the audience. You see, my man, we live in an age where information is as abundant as grains of sand. We've got lots of information flying out there. So these folks trust me for quality, eye-opening, and very important information, of which I am totally convinced, my man, that our conversation is gonna be insightful and impactful. So for that reason, James, let's get started with your introduction. talk to us about your personal or your professional journey, because right now we are so curious. Want to know how James got here. Then afterwards, I've gotten some beautiful questions for you. Okay, James, my man, over to you.
Sounds good. So, one of my favorite things is finding ways to shine a light in the darkness. And the way that we do that, building off of what you were saying, is we look for ways to focus on the question, be question oriented. Because if you can figure out what you're trying to understand and actually verbalize it in a short sentence, you're not only going to get more out of yourself, but those around you. So, from that perspective, to answer your question about my background and how you became so unlucky as to talk to me today. So my professional career starts a little bit over a decade ago. I was actually working as a freelance writer, and in that space, more and more of the content I was producing was being used by the digital marketing world. The SEO content. Content was king. And it still is to a large extent, but the way that it's a king is changing, and we can talk about that in a little bit. From there, I started working in-house at a few different agencies. One was a Disney spinoff. The other was focused on personal injury law firms. So I'm convinced I did something horrible in a past life because I've had to work with so many lawyers. Regardless of that, then all of a sudden out of nowhere, the agency that I was working for, owned by a very good friend of mine, Dan Steiner, who's an amazing marketer, the company basically sold or was acquired by a med tech startup out in California. So what a lot of companies do is they look for a digital marketing agency to help them grow. And John Hoffman, who is the founder of that company, he had an exceptional eye for talent. I'm definitely not biased on that. He picked us. But also, he understood that if you're just a customer or a client of a digital marketing agency, and I own a digital marketing agency, so I'm not against the business entirely. I'm just against the way most agencies do it because they trap people into these contracts, and if they want to get out, they suddenly discover that all this stuff they built wasn't theirs to begin with, and they have to buy it, which is kind of crazy. But those are all crazy stories, and that really parallels to the experience in AI, and I'll be happy to kind of unpack how I got involved in the AI evolution. But my most formative business and professional experience happened over the last 6 years with Launch Medical. And when I joined, they were doing about $20,000 a month in revenue. By the time I left, I was the chief operating officer. Then I exited about a year and a half ago. But during that time that I was there, we generated over $20 million in revenue. And this is in a space that's really difficult. So one of the challenges is if you're going to build a product that solves a problem without pills, without chemicals, without all the side effects, and it's something that's really, up until that point, really lucrative for the pharmaceutical industry, you can expect a ton of pushback, both directly from the pharmaceutical industry, but also indirectly through their influence at agencies like the FDA. So all of a sudden, you end up under a microscope just because you're trying to disrupt a space that is insanely profitable. For us, it was erectile dysfunction. Dealing with that is something that's, very embarrassing for a lot of guys. It's not something guys talk about. And, they've been trained to take a pill. What we discovered was we could actually resolve that issue, kind of go past just band-aiding the problem and actually trigger the growth of more blood vessels, increase blood flow, all the stuff you need to kind of get back to where you were in your teens. That's what our technology did. And it allowed men to do it at home for the first time. So we had explosive success there, but it was very challenging to reach that point because at the end of the day, we were constantly fighting, two different things. If we were too direct about what our product did, you had a challenge of how do you get your ads out there because you get siloed into the same advertising channels as other sexual health products and other sex products, which are really gimmicky and really, challenging to build credibility in. And then on the flip side, you have agency pushback saying, well, you can't claim that. Well, okay, we have information that this does occur. Well, you can't talk about that because you don't have the prerequisite forms and filings and case studies and all clinical trials and all of those things, which is really important in society. You want to make sure that the information that's reaching people is reliable and credible. But sometimes we kind of overdo it. I think we saw the same thing during COVID where, medical professionals were talking about hey, I'm not sure that this COVID booster, this COVID shot is for everybody. And, I think it's insanely important that we make personal choices about our health and we get access to all the information we need to make informed choices for us and our families. But sometimes the fight to control information by governments and bureaucracies sometimes keeps really good solutions or better solutions away from people. So that's an area that I am really passionate about. How do we democratize information? How do we improve accessibility? And there's a whole bunch I can unpack there, but I don't want to take over the whole podcast here.
Amazing, my man, I tell you. And that's a beautiful one. You mentioned and how you're passionate about being the light in the dark and being question oriented. That's a very important one. So, I've got some questions here. Are you ready for me?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So, let us talk about AI for a moment. So, what is sustainable AI?
So here's the problem, and I don't think enough people are talking about this. So after exiting Launch Medical, I moved to Denver for medical reasons. They have one of the best respiratory hospitals out here. You'll hear me wheeze every once in a while. I basically sound like an old man who's been smoking for 30 years. But if you can get past that, I've got a lot to share. And after I moved to Denver, found an amazing medical team at National Jewish Health, which I really like them, by the way, because I'm not Jewish, but they still helped me out and they didn't even check my schmeckle. So, they're all right by me. They do good work. But anyways, I also discovered that my best friend that I grew up with in Virginia Beach actually lived out here as well. And at the same time that I was working in the e-commerce space, he had been working in the AI and big data space going back to like 2014, like before it was cool, before people were talking about it. Like I feel like right now, talking about ethical AI, we have a ton of people out there who were experts on real estate yesterday and Bitcoin before that. And they're all over LinkedIn trying to sell people on their AI consulting services. But if all they're doing is consulting and telling you about solutions out in the market, they're doing you a great disservice because compute has never been more expensive. And what do I mean by that? Well, Moore's law, that applies to our personal devices quite well. Laptops have become less expensive. The things we hold in our hand are much less expensive. I mean, you look at the capabilities of an iPhone, it does more than the lunar lander could do computationally. And that thing sits in our pocket and plays our music for us. It's incredible the ability and access to technology that we have. But Moore's law is not quite working out the same way in cloud computing. And the reason for that is at the same time as technological advances are occurring, there's so many new use cases and new ideas and new ways to use AI that the demand curve just keeps going up and up and up and up and up. And I mean, even the podcast software that we're using today to talk to each other, it utilizes AI in the background to help with edits and help, make sure that my voice doesn't sound so bad. All sorts of, different use cases for AI are popping up every day. So the first piece of ethical AI is the person you're talking to knowledgeable enough to know whether AI that they're recommending is sustainable? Because the worst thing that could happen is you wake up one day and this AI solution that you invested a great deal of money in and time and your data and everything is suddenly offline because that company forgot to pay their AWS bill because they ran out of money. So there's a crunch coming. I think a lot of these planes that appear to be taking off the runway right now, they're going to crash and burn before they get there because at the end of the day, they just don't have enough gas in the tank to be able to survive and scale. So the way that we solve that, and to kind of back up just for a brief moment, so when my buddy Jeff and I got together, we were just comparing life stories, catching up on what's been going on over the last decade plus. I realized, well, one of the best tools for marketing is the use of quiz funnels. So digital marketing, you'll see a lot of times you'll be asked to take a quiz. And the goal of that quiz is not just to learn about you, but to educate you across the finish line. And so if you take those quiz answers and attach them to a user profile, you can send out very customized email flows that are really effective at getting people from the funnel, into your shopping cart and converting, and then also upselling on other things. But I said to Jeff, I was like, the problem is we have the attention span of a goldfish. So if I go more than 3, 4, 5 questions, people are going to drop off. They're just not interested. They're going to get distracted by something else on Facebook. So how do we add AI into that to make it more engaging? And the solution we came up with was providing a series of questions that you would also have the ability to chat with AI about the questions. So we don't just gather the information from the quiz questions, but we gather all the things that our user is thinking about outside of those questions, about those questions. All of that information gets put into a user profile that allows us to really hyper customize our follow-up marketing. So the problem though, I was like, yeah, Jeff, let's just build this, right? So we spend a weekend together, we throw this thing together. And just to run like a basic test of data through this AI model that was just an off-the-shelf solution, it would cost us $800 in compute charges to do that. And so at that point, running that small amount of data through the funnel and seeing that level of expense, it's not scalable, it's not sustainable. So ethical AI is about figuring out how do we solve that problem. So instead of just going to market and saying, well, we'll just raise the price of everything and we'll figure out a way to pass along the cost to the customer, we spent about 6 months. We kind of went dark for about 6 months and shifted into building out our own virtual cloud AI environment. And that engine involves both the AI engine where you can swap and paste, or swap and choose from like 12 different AI engines, as well as the vectoring of the data and secure bandwidth and connections so that you can integrate with the existing tech stack that companies have. So what we've done is we've basically created by accident an AI company. And so now we're working with law firms and medical practices and 3PLs, which are shipping companies that are the backbone of all these e-commerce sites that you see. They handle fulfillment, shipping, all that stuff. We're building AI solutions on an engine that gives you Ferrari performance, but Prius, miles per gallon price tag. You're going to spend a lot less running on these systems. You're going to be able to build sustainably. And because you own your own virtual cloud, your data never leaves your infrastructure. And because we don't have to use caching, which is what most of these other public AI models use, you're not leaving a copy of your data on somebody else's infrastructure. You own your data, it never leaves your infrastructure, and there aren't copies just sitting out there. Like when people use our infrastructure, number one, each customer has their own walled off garden. So they're in their own space. They're not going to be affected by what other people are doing. But also, even if we wanted to go in and look at your data, we couldn't because it's all encrypted and there's no caching. So there's no copy left behind on the engine itself. So at the end of the day, we found a problem quite by accident. We were looking to build a better funnel, a better mousetrap. And we realized there's this fundamental problem. And all these companies, especially the small and medium-sized businesses in America, they do not have access to the technology, the teams, the strategies that all of these large Fortune 500 companies have. So what we've done is we've democratized those strategies, the solutions, the infrastructure in a way that's highly customizable, and it's not going to cause a bunch of problems. Because again, going back to ethical AI, very briefly here, if a consultant comes in and says AI can do everything, they're full of it. They're going to cause more problems than they solve. The moment that your AI integration, quote unquote, goes live is going to cause so many challenges for your team. And already people are nervous that, AI is going to take their job. If you start implementing AI poorly, then people are going to be frustrated. They're going to be looking for other jobs because they know that, like, well, if this company's using AI and I read somewhere that AI is replacing jobs, so that means that my job's in danger. I better start looking somewhere else. It's exactly the opposite you want happening in your business. So for us, we always approach it from a process and people first perspective, because our goal is not to destroy jobs. Our goal is to make your team and your people so valuable that you want to hire more. Because we've 10x the capability, we've removed the redundancy, we've removed the friction, and we've created systems that complement your culture and your people and your process rather than trying to replace it. So that's the difference between ethical and unethical AI, in my opinion.
This is amazing. And I really wish every organization can think like this, putting people first. That's really beautiful. 6 months later, you develop something beautiful. That's very inspiring. I tell you. Thank you for all that you're
Well, the
doing.
only way that you can do that, yeah, absolutely. The only way that you can do that you can accomplish that, is if you come from a position of strength. And so we entered this chapter of our lives We both had success in the corporate world. We were both financially independent. We didn't need to figure out how to pay for lunch tomorrow. So we were able to figure out what are the core problems and invest the time, energy, and capital to solve those problems and now offer them to the market in a way that is attainable to every business in America for the most part. What we like to say is if you can afford one more full-time employee, you can afford for us to be your technology partner. And to just put a button on the $800 piece of it. So I mentioned, those $800 to run that data set. On our infrastructure, it costs about $4. So it's a huge difference in terms of cost and sustainability.
Wow, that's really amazing. And that's so smart how you came up with that beautiful solution. Okay, so I've got two more questions here. All right. So, what does learn and earn mean to you?
Yeah, there's two phrases I use all the time: learn and earn and think on paper. And both of those phrases, if you focus on those, at least in my experience, you go a lot further, a lot faster, and a lot more efficiently. So learn and earn is where I look back on my initial career as a writer. Yeah, okay, I'm paying the bills by writing, but why am I being asked to write this content? And by understanding why I was being asked to write that content, I began to learn about SEO. And so I moved up the ladder. And then once I was working on the SEO side, I was wondering, well, why are companies focused on these particular areas of business? And so then I became, more familiar with data-driven business building. All these things, you can't really learn these things in school efficiently, in my opinion. I think school is a great place to get access, and I'm a college dropout, so I'm a loser. But this loser's opinion is
No, no, you're not.
college is something. Well, you disagree, but you don't know me that well. I promise you get to know me better. Anyways, but no, the challenge that colleges, especially right now, have is when I talk to my friends who are younger than me, they're going through school. They're not allowed to use AI, and there's all these bans on it. And unfortunately, they're about to enter a workforce where AI it has to be a second language. Prompting is a second language that if you don't know how to prompt, if you don't know which tools to use for which part of your process, even just in your personal life, you're going to be so left behind by those that do. So I really like the idea of learning and earning. And if you follow the dollars in the market, it's going to guide you and focus you on the things that provide value versus all the extra stuff that we get caught up in. And so I think that's why Robert Kiyosaki likes to say that, A students end up working for C students. I think there's a lot of truth to that. It's not universal. There's a lot of really great, smart people that come out of colleges, certainly smarter than me. But I just see a difference in if you're looking at purely economic success, flexibility, versatility, all those things. If you've been out there paying tuition at the school of life, you can come out ahead if you stay focused and dedicated enough compared to those who are paying a huge amount of tuition for something that's much more structured. So that's the learning and earning part. And then the thinking on paper part, very briefly. I'm a big believer that if you didn't write it down, it didn't happen. So,
Mhm.
I spend a great deal of time writing things down, even if they're things that are just personal thoughts, personal reflections. I like to get things out of my head and onto paper so that I can unpack them, challenge them, and approach them from different angles, but also be able to be more present in meetings and actually have a record to go off of that actually produces results. So, I've really tried to instill that in our team that, you've got to think on paper, whether that's a Google Doc or the Day One app, which I use quite a bit for journaling, whatever the case may be, you got to get it out of your head because otherwise it doesn't exist.
I got that. I got that. And I will still stand on my point, my man. I don't believe you're a loser. I'm afraid losers do software and tools that are this impactful. What do you think?
I think
Okay.
humility goes a long way.
Yeah, that's the key, man. I tell you. One's got to be humble to the core. So, my man, finally, all right, how did your personal medical struggle prepare you for startup life?
Oh gosh. Okay, so this one's a big one to unpack. How much time do we have left?
Let's just say 3, 4 minutes.
You got it. All right. So my journey started, I like to joke that, all of us were involuntarily brought into this world kicking and screaming. And my experience, my mom was pregnant with me and my family was in the Navy. We were deployed in Guam at the time. Guam does not have, or at least back then did not have, the best medical care in the world. Whether you were on the naval base or in the private hospitals, they had enough to deal with some of the basics, but they didn't have advanced care. Like, for example, they didn't have a NICU, which is really important. That neonatal intensive care unit is really important for providing a life support to children that are born prematurely. So I was born 8 weeks premature. Now, the Navy had a protocol. If they noticed something in the blood work of an expecting mother that could indicate complications in the pregnancy, they were supposed to relocate the expecting mother to Tripler, which is a naval base in Hawaii with a much more advanced medical system. Unfortunately, there's different perspectives and opinions on this, but from what I've read in my medical records, the doctors missed it. And so they didn't realize that there were going to be complications until my mom was giving birth to me. And so at that point, they basically put me on an adult respirator. They used the tools they had available to them. They did the best they could. But they also didn't have something called surfactant, which for premature babies, we're actually, those last few weeks in the womb, we still have rock hard lungs. They're not soft yet because you don't want the baby to be breathing inside the womb. So when you're born, they're soft enough to expand and contract. But if you're born prematurely, you need to make up for that. You still have these hard lung tissue that needs to be softened. And the way they do that is with something called surfactant, which is actually a medicine that comes from cows. And unfortunately, they did not have surfactant on the island at the time. So they immediately started the process of getting a medevac in place to get us over to Tripler or Japan. So I know that one of the planes flew in from Japan. And the reason I say one of the planes is the first plane, they loaded us up. As I've been told, I don't quite remember this, but I've been told that, they loaded us up on the plane, and right as we were getting ready to take off, the plane had a mechanical failure. They had to send out a second aircraft. So the delays were immense in getting me to that level of care. And so in the end, what I had was lungs that were very stiff, or lung tissue that was stiff, that was being overinflated and underdeflated, I guess, depending on how you want to look at it, repeatedly. And then on the plane, once we got a plane that was working and functional, the actual life support system on the plane actually failed. And so they handbagged me for the 12-hour flight. They all took turns handbagging me for about a 12-hour flight from Guam to Tripler. So by the time I got to Hawaii, it was way past the window for surfactant to be effective. They still administered it. But the end result is I have a ton of scarring in my lungs. If you listen with the stethoscope, it sounds like, someone's dragging a piano across the floor. And so at each stage of my life, there was always a level of struggle and challenge. And I'm very fortunate to have amazing parents who took amazing care of me and did the best they could under the circumstances. And now today, fast forward, finally out of the medical system that the Navy has, which I do not have a lot of great things to say about, unfortunately. But the team over at National Jewish, if you're dealing with a respiratory problem, they're one of the top research hospitals in the country. And they were able to make a 3D model of my chest recently. And there's a lot of different little pieces that we could go into there. But the bottom line is, if what you're dealing with is the unexpected nature of life, and we're all dealing with it, whether we realize it or not, anybody, you could walk out your front door and get hit by a bus tomorrow. But we're all dealing with the difficulty predicting the future. And for me, I've had to build a life around knowing that I'm going to get pneumonia every winter, and I'm going to have different, respiratory issues if I catch the flu or catch a cold. And these are all things that can impact your productivity, impact your ability to kind of keep up, so to speak. And so for me, the reason content writing was so appealing on the freelance side was I could write from anywhere. If I was in the hospital, I could bring my laptop and still earn money and pay my bills. And so everything that I've built, including this most recent venture, I've been offered multiple very lucrative positions at companies, but I'm not willing to take them because for two reasons. One, I want to own my future. But two, I am not going to tell somebody that I can do something that I can't. So, if I were to take a leadership role at a large corporation, they're going to expect me to be available 80 hours a week, like, I was at my previous job. And I'm not confident in my current health condition that I can do that. And so we have a succession plan in place at my current company. We've literally built it around this so that, the team that's here can build around me and without me if necessary to deliver on our promises. So that's what's really important to me, is leading with integrity, engaging with companies with integrity, and being able to over deliver on what we promise, even if the uncertainties of life get in the way.
I tell you, thank you for sharing that, my man. And I've got to say, you are so strong and very determined, because you knew what you wanted. I'm not going to allow the situation just to dictate my life. You knew what you wanted, and look at the beautiful stuff you're doing. It's amazing. Leaders must lead with integrity. I got that. So, to bring this to an end, James, and I'm going to take that as a final thought. For folks who like to reach out to you, learn more about the wonderful stuff you're doing, ask your questions, or maybe they need your programs or services, how can that be possible?
Yeah, so you can go to our website. It's over, Lang, Lang.com. Feel free to look me up on LinkedIn, James Lang, Lang. You'll see I'm in Denver, the Aurora area. Pretty active on LinkedIn. If people have questions, if people have stumbling blocks, I joke all the time that a lot of times I have these little 5-minute conversations with someone that I just met where they, for whatever reason, start to bring up something that's causing them friction in their life, professional, personal, otherwise. And it's not that I know more than them. I've certainly had unique experiences, but offering a different perspective is a great way to give back and try to help people kind of unjam the logjam. And so anyone that wants to reach out, I don't care if you're looking for AI services or digital marketing or just somebody to talk to who's been there, done that, and you value that perspective, reach out. I'm happy to help. Again, I'm dealing with some unique health challenges, not sure how long I'll be around, but my goal is to provide as much value and give back as much as I can in the time that I have left.
Thank you so very much for all that you're doing, James. And it is pretty impactful. And your story, your journey is pretty inspiring. Your story is igniting hope. And thank you so very much for sharing it. God bless you, my man. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for the space, and thank you for creating this platform. It's really cool.
Yeah, awesome. So that's going to be the end of the show, James. Thank you for coming, and thank you for sharing this beautiful stuff with us. It means a whole lot. Thank you, my man. That was